Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from 670 The Score and the Mully and Haugh Show. Dan Wiederer is from the Chicago Tribune, covers the Bears, and is at Halas Hall. We are here on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch us on the 670 The Score's YouTube page. You can rate us. You can subscribe. You can give us all kinds of feedback. This week, there's been a ton of it, a lot of things swirling around, Dan. What is the tone like at Halas Hall before we get too deep into the weeds about everything that's happened this week?
Yeah, eventful day within an eventful week on Thursday at Halas Hall. I think it's been a cleanup process. It's been a recovery process. Both of those things all at once. I felt like today, Thursday afternoon, was the first day where you felt a little bit more of a settled vibe than you had felt throughout the start of the week and it really into Wednesday. And now it's all about how do the Bears respond? How do they respond on short notice to get on the plane, go to Florida, play a road game, and get this thing back on track as soon as possible, because if they don't, we all know what's lurking.
We're going to look at the Buccaneers in depth. We're going to make our predictions. We'll hear from some people along the way, but let's start with our opening drive.
It's time for the opening drive.
Dan, it's very difficult to quantify, but you've covered the team for 10 years and you're up there regularly. I've been around for 20, and I know what you're talking about, and you can get a sense just in the tone and of the rhetoric and kind of the what people say and maybe what they aren't saying. But this week, it seemed like to you, I know that you feel this way, that the Bears were rattled by this loss in a way that hasn't quite shaken the organization. This opening season loss to the Packers, not only bad historically by the numbers, but it felt a lot different, and it sat a lot more uncomfortably at Halas Hall this week.
There's no question about it, David, and there's a deeper discussion to be had. Thankfully, we have the platform to have it here because you're right. It is difficult to quantify, but it's easy to feel, and it's a vibe thing, and it's a vibe that you can feel and you can sense when it's there, and it was there this week. I think what makes it different is that it's September 14th as we're recording this. It's week 2. I looked at Brad Biggs on Wednesday, and I said it's week bleeping 2. There was just a feeling inside this building that he and I have felt before. He's probably felt it more than I have because he's been here twice as long. But again, it's week 2. Like I can go through it with you, David, in terms of instances in my brain that registered as comparable, right? 2014, you were there when Robbie Gould and Brandon Marshall got in the post-game shouting match after the loss to the Dolphins. And that was one of those moments where it was like, uh-oh, it's just that uh-oh feeling on like, what just happened here? And what does it mean? Big picture. 2019, I think it was the Chargers loss. If you remember, not only what happened at the end of that game, you asked the good questions in the press conference that got Matt all defensive on.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Did you even consider throwing the ball at the end of the game to try to get a field goal attempt that was shorter than whatever it was, 48 yards? And then it was all off the rails from there when we learned that there was no sharp game management to that situation. And that was the start of a period where you're like, we knew at that point in 2019 that things weren't off to the start that the Bears wanted them to, but that was an moment. 2021, I think back to the last time I was in Tampa, to be honest with you. They go there in October and they're still a team like fighting to be maybe a 500 team and get on the right side of things. And you get your doors blown off. You gave up 35 points to Tom Brady in the first half of a football game. And then after the game, the head coach stood at the podium and said that he loved the togetherness in the Saturday night team meeting. And you were like, Matt, you like the togetherness the night before your team got kicked in the teeth and we're down 35-3 at halftime. I don't know what it amounts for. Anyway, it's a long way of saying that like, there's just a feeling that you get, and I've never had it in week 2 before.
Well, let me ask you this, because those are somewhat different scenarios.
Yeah, very different.
That probably share a common thread. 2014, 2019, 2021, and I think 2014 the dysfunction was more obvious in the Bears that season, and it permeated into everything that they did and said. 2019, I think it was more maybe an absence of strong leadership, or maybe not being able to understand how to handle success from the previous year and take
success and pressure.
Yeah, manage anxiety. And in 2021, I just think maybe by then there was a lack of direction, because there might have been a lack of respect. But then the commonality in all those 3 things, and what you see when teams react poorly to failure and they're not able to overcome that adversity, I think is there's a leadership void somehow along the way, or there's a weak link on the ladder or the hierarchy. I don't know that I want to sound that alarm yet, and I don't know if it's appropriate. I wonder, do you think that this is something to keep an eye on, or have you noticed, or is it too early to maybe wonder about that?
Well, it's certainly something worth keeping an eye on because we all know, and I hope that the Bears didn't get caught up in this week because this is key for them. We know what's lurking in week 3, and the Bears cannot let week 3 beat them in week 2, if that makes sense, because you have to go in and you have to be really micro focused on what it's going to take on every single possession to steal a road win from a very capable team in the Buccaneers who matches up well against you. And so you have to lock in a way that gets you in a position to succeed on Sunday without worrying about, what happens here. It reminds me of myself on the golf course. So I make a triple bogey on the first hole. It's like, oh God, I've got to try to make double eagle on the second hole, which is impossible. And you have to resist that temptation to make up for how bad the one thing was immediately. And I felt like that was kind of here in this building. Now I will tell you this, it was confirmed in the locker room on Thursday by 2 very respected leaders in that locker room, Darnell Mooney and Eddie Jackson. Eddie Jackson, unsolicited, said that he walked in the locker room on Monday, the day after that loss, and it was more quiet than he ever remembers a Monday locker room. And so this is a guy that's in his 7th season who walked in there and was like, whoa, this is like different. Now, Eddie tried to spin it or at least believes that quiet was an indication that it matters to guys in that locker room, and that the disappointment and how sharp that was coming out of Sunday with the way they performed can ultimately be a good thing because there's guys in there that care and are going to fight to get it back. Darnell Mooney, I'll let you respond to that in a second. Darnell Mooney said after practice today that he felt that lull in energy and that deflation lasting into the early portions of Wednesday's practice. And that's the last thing you want to have happen here, where that loss on Sunday, the 24-hour rule is cliche, but it's a real thing in terms of a team's ability to get back up. And so there's a lot for them to kind of sift through here as they get ready to play the Buccaneers.
And I want to sift through what Jalen Johnson and Matt Eberflus had to say. We have some audio we want to get to, but first, I just want to add to that. I just don't know that, frankly. First of all, your observation about the reaction is telling to me, because you don't manufacture these kinds of things. You're not a drama king, and you're not looking for things that aren't there. So it's relevant, and I think it's a bit of a concern. The other thing is that regardless of how it's explained, I still will never understand how a professional team enters a season after a historical low point in their franchise and lacks the energy and the emotion and the intangibles that they've identified that they lacked against the Packers in the first game of this season. So I don't know any explanation. They could have sounded the most coherent and directed and confident bunch and have everything together, and I still think it would have been inexcusable.
Well, and I think early in the week, I think you sensed collectively from a lot of different angles that there weren't great answers for the questions you just asked. Why wasn't the execution there? Why wasn't the fire there? Why wasn't the fight there when you got down by 11 in the third quarter and seemed to just kind of cave in? Those things need to be answered quickly. They need to be answered this week. Look, championship teams understand how to win. Last place teams create ways to lose. It's a habitual thing on both ends of the spectrum, and the Bears are on the wrong end of the spectrum right now, trying to get back to that middle ground where it's okay. How do we figure that out? And you just would like to see, and you're hopeful, right? Like, those championship teams, the Chiefs get the ball at the end of games and it's here we go. Right. You get that feeling. The losing teams get down in the third and fourth quarter and they go, here we go again, and so I think the Bears have to resist the undertow of that here we go again feeling to get themselves out of this as quickly as humanly possible, because again, we know what happens if another dud is had Sunday in Tampa.
How did Matt Eberflus, in your mind, address what we're talking about in a way that was meaningful?
I don't know yet. I don't really know kind of behind closed doors what the emphatic messaging was, how it was received. I think Matt is under a microscope here, and he's going to be under a microscope for the next 5 or 6 weeks to figure out how you manage this stuff. This is still a head coach who's 18 games into his tenure, doing a lot of things for the first time, and probably, trying to figure out what are the buttons to push with the team when they're in this state. Our old friend John Fox used to say that every week in the NFL it's either crisis or carnival. It's either crisis or carnival. This week it's a crisis, and now it's up to Matt to figure out what crisis management looks like. Part of that, David, I asked him on Monday is what is the method of response here for a football team that reaches this crossroads after a season opening loss by 18 points at home to the rival. And Matt kind of gave his wish list for how he hopes this team responds.
Proper response has been to look at the performance, in the right light. Okay. What you did well, what you need to improve on, and then get back to work, and then have a relentless pursuit to get better. Okay. To persevere. This is a little bump in the road, right? It's adversity, and our guys have to persevere through that. And how we do that is by pulling together and making sure that we're working on the fundamentals and skills at each position. That's the player and the coach.
The losing to the Packers by 18 is not a bump in the road. It's a Chicago-sized pothole.
The tire's flat. Yeah, you got to pull off, and you got to get that tire.
And that I understand the need to rationalize for every football coach. It's their instinct, but man.
Yeah, but I do think the methodology that he speaks of has to be there this week. You have to have that togetherness and that micro focus to just, get back on track and understand what is required of you. This league doesn't wait around for you to get your emotions in check. You know what I mean? There's another game to be played, and there's a mountain of preparation to play it successfully. And you just, you have to kind of cross your fingers that they've done the preparation properly over the last few days, and obviously going into Friday and Saturday to give themselves an opportunity to play their best football in Tampa.
And Jalen Johnson's response was also interesting.
I would just say we got to raise the bar a little bit. I think the only thing we can do is attack our Wednesday practice and go out there and compete against each other, push each other to be better, push each other to get in better shape, push each other to be locked in on our assignments, and then continue that through the week. And I feel like at the end of the day, it comes down to Sunday. We can preach all we want about practice and doing things and having energy and juice. We do that. I know we're a routine. Our practice is hard. We do what we're supposed to do in practice. But it comes down to executing on Sundays. And I think having the motivation from this loss, I think, will give us an extra push and extra, I would say, energy to go in and take that nasty taste out of our mouth. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to Sunday.
He's right. I don't know this quest for juice. It's everybody's looking for juice.
They've been listening to me too much. I'm the juice
They've
guy.
been listening to this podcast, and they're copying your lingo and language, and everyone wants the juice. Why would it be in short supply? That's the biggest mystery that I have about this season. Everybody. And did Jaquan Brisker text Justin Fields about something to do with the juice?
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to bring up next, was that Jaquan volunteered that on Wednesday afternoon, that he just kind of felt like there was an energy lull in the second half of that game Sunday and was taken aback by it, and just felt comfortable enough. I appreciate his initiative and his assertiveness going to one of the team captains and the obvious hub of energy of this team and saying, hey, look, we got to get that up somehow, some way. It doesn't have to be artificial. It doesn't have to be disingenuous, but we need that energy there. But again, David, this is week effing 2. You know what I mean? And these are things that you're usually talking about in early November with a team that is, just careening toward the guardrails. And you're just like, oh my God, keep it up. You should not be there in week 2. And so look, Jalen makes a great point there in that soundbite we just played there about this all comes down to Sunday, and it's everything you do going towards Sunday matters, and it's significant. But now, when those 3 hours unfold on a playing field, on a stage that's lit, you better bring everything that you brought to the week in a way that helps you perform and make plays.
Football is so much about the mental approach and the focus. I think that we can agree that it was lacking against the Packers, and it is necessary against the Buccaneers on the road in a building that isn't easy to play in, no matter who's the quarterback for the Buccaneers. So I think those are the intangibles. Anything else about the kind of the things that are hard to quantify, Dan, before we get on to some of the things roster-wise that will contribute to this?
Well, I said this earlier in the week on the radio, and I'll reiterate it here. When you're coming from the spot that the Bears are coming from in 2022, which was 14 losses, 10 losses in a row, and all the stuff that came with it, a loss like Sunday's in week 1 to the rival at home by 18 points leaves the door open for people to justifiably question everything. And everything was questioned this week, from the quarterback play to the coaching to the defensive game plan to the pass rush to the offensive coordinators, aptitude and ability to run a game. Literally everything, to the juice, everything inside this building was questioned this week. And that's the scary part, when there's not that one thing that you can kind of just lean on and say, okay, this is reliable. This is reliable in our entire culture and entire operation and our entire skill set and our entire, cohesion, whatever it is. What's reliable? And I think the outside world was asking that question, and the inside world here inside 1920 Football Drive didn't have real answers for it. They've got to find them, and they've got to find them this week in Tampa, because look, like I will say this once and for all: if you go down and you get beat in a bad fashion in Tampa on Sunday, it's a name your score game at Arrowhead. It's a name your score game. The Chiefs can decide how much they want to run the pinball machine up and embarrass you. It's going to be up to them at that point, and it's going to be out of your hands.
Last thought on that for me. You're right. If it were just the quarterback, oh boy, the Bears are just a Justin Fields consistent game away from breaking through. Or if it was just, oh my gosh, if they could just get Chase Claypool to hustle and to block, everything would fall into place, or one area or another. But it's everything. It's
Right.
all of the above. And as Foxy, as who we like to quote, we used to say, it's all a problem.
It's all a
And
problem.
it is. So that's the most disconcerting thing. And it's as if the Bears realized that when they got to work on
Yeah.
Monday after
Yeah.
the bottom had fallen out at Soldier Field. So it's something to keep an eye on. You certainly have your finger on the pulse of it, and we'll continue to look at some of those cues
Yeah.
along the way.
And my last word on that is that the difference for me between Sunday and 2019 Thursday nighter against Green Bay and the curtain lifter for the 100th season is that team laid an egg on offense, but they still had the best defense in the league from the previous season that believed that they were good enough to keep things together. And that you came back off of that loss, and it was just like, there was one half of the building was saying, just lean on us. We'll get this taken care of while you guys figure out your mess. Just lean on us because we're still dominant. Now we know how that season unfolded later in the year, but at that point, there was a belief that you had something special to use as a flotation device. And right now, I think they were kind of thrashing in the waters with no flotation device.
Let's take a look at Sunday's game plan. So the Bears are going to be without Kyler Gordon after obfuscating for a couple days and kind of revealing nothing. Kyler Gordon went on injured reserve with a hand injury. I understand it might be broken, Dan. You might have more details. That's a big loss. You lose your nickel cornerback, starting defensive back in a secondary that was promising. You lose one of your most effective blitzers on a team that doesn't like to apply pressure, only did 20% of the time, with four or more rushers, more than four rushers against the Packers. And Kyler Gordon, let's face it, is his second-round pick in his second season. You need him to pay off, and this is going to slow his development as a contributor, and also hurt the Bears in the short term with his absence.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And it leaves you reshuffling at a place where you felt was an area of strength for you. Kyler Gordon will miss a minimum of 4 games. We'll hopefully get updates as time passes on, did he need surgery? Is the recovery timeline feasible? When he comes back to play, is he going to have to play with something on his hand? All those types of things are questions up the road for Kyler Gordon. But in the immediate term, it leaves you trying to figure out where you're going to go with that slot corner position. Now, the next man up is Josh Blackwell. Josh Blackwell missed practice Thursday with a hamstring issue. Josh Blackwell's availability for Sunday looks more and more iffy. Greg Stroman was promoted from the practice squad to the 53-man roster and is certainly an option for you in that position. Tyreek Stevenson also said after practice on Thursday, given the experience he had at times in college playing in the nickel, that there's been at least some conversation on, like, if need be, can you bump inside? Now, I don't think that's the direction the Bears will lean. I don't think that's the direction they should lean, because I think you want to get him playing comfortably outside and doing what he does there. But you need to find an answer, and so now it's up to Matt Eberflus, it's up to Alan Williams, it's up to the defensive coaching staff to figure out how do we plug in here in a way that keeps us steady. And by the way, you're going to Tampa to play 2 of the best receivers in the league in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
One question I'd like to explore, and I'm thinking out loud here, but I do wonder this, because I think that safety theoretically is a little bit easier position to learn and to play in the Bears cover 2 scheme in that kind of defense alignment.
Mhm.
I do wonder if Jaquan Brisker eventually might deserve or merit a look as a slot cornerback. He's versatile enough. Certainly, he's physical. He's a good blitzer, and I do think he has the feet to be able to do that job. And if you could find somebody behind him who is maybe a better option than your fifth cornerback who's pressed into duty, maybe that's an alternative if Josh Blackwell isn't healthy and you have to go a different direction. Don't know if it's even feasible, but you do see him playing near the line of scrimmage and you're not worried about him getting caught up in traffic. It just presents another alternative if you want to be creative.
I love Jaquan Brisker. I'd be very concerned about his twitchiness and his ability to be quick twitch against some of those really quick slot receivers that can make life difficult for you. I don't think that's necessarily in his forte, but man, they've got to figure something out because you talk about reshuffling the parts, it always creates voids elsewhere. And that's why, when we walked into the season, you and I said, look, like depth is going to be tested on this roster, and depth by the general manager's own admission isn't where it needs to be yet in the rebuilding process. And so when you lose, a starting guard, like they lost with Tevin Jenkins, when you lose a starting slot corner, guys that are not just guys, but guys that are supposed to be important to what you're building, you got to reshuffle in multiple areas, and it's not an easy chore.
Let's talk about Chase Claypool because there was a social media clip that compiled and condensed all of his loafs or poor plays, missed blocks. Kind of, it was definitely geared to make people aware that he didn't have a good game. I'm not always sure about the purpose. Social media has created this entire industry of either hype plays or the opposite. In the case
Carnival or crisis, right?
Yeah, carnival or crisis. Chase Claypool, to me, did not play at a level that was acceptable. He's got to get better. He's got to show more effort, and he's got to take more pride in what he does. It's easy to say from the outside. That said, Dan, I want to know what you think about it because my sense is that, yes, he needs to be dealt with. Yes, maybe even held accountable. If you want to make him inactive, Flusy talked about that. We'll get into that. But I don't think that Chase Claypool is at the top of the list of problems this Bears team needs to address in a week after they got blown up by the rival at home.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that it has gotten an inordinate amount of attention in Chicago this week and Bears Twitter and podcasts, whatever you want to, the world that we live in. I have not been comfortable with the amount of attention it has warranted versus the amount of attention I think it deserves. Yeah, you've got a disgruntled player or a disappointing player who isn't coming through. And I realize he symbolizes a lot of what Ryan Poles is and what Matt Eberflus stresses. But if you're going to tell me that sending Chase Claypool a message is going to make the difference this week, okay, maybe. But I don't see it as big of an issue as a lot of people have this week.
So I got a couple of things to share with you that'll be new to you, but I think the significance is that there is a symbolism to it because it's a symbolism of the culture that you said you were building, that we're going to be an effort-based football team that finishes every single play with great aggression. And so like when you have a guy so blatantly and flagrantly violating the standard that has been set here for 15 months, when you have a guy that was traded for a year ago and valuable draft capital was given up, when you have a guy that was supposed to be part of this dynamic receiving core that was going to help take your quarterback to the next level, and that's the season opening performance that he delivers, people start to get justifiably worried about what all's happening here and what all they can believe in and what all they can puncture with a like a balloon with a pin. And so I think that's part of what this is. The other part of this is you mentioned Matt Eberflus not only leaving the door open but seemingly pushing it open for the idea that Chase Claypool might not be inactive or might be inactive in week 2. Directly asked about that earlier in the week, said, we're exploring all possibilities, which would give you the indication that, well, Thursday evening here at Halas Hall is assistant coach time. And we visited with Tyke Tolbert just a little bit ago, and he was asked, are you expecting Chase to be active? And he said, something, I don't know. I certainly assume he will be active on Sunday in Tampa, and indicated that Chase Claypool has been taking his normal reps with the offense. And so if that was in the plans, it certainly hasn't been in the practice plans. And so that's one of those instances, David, where I think this is another example where the head coach, in trying to, create some illusional competitive advantage, creates more of an issue, because that did get traction out there
totally
in the
did.
real world.
He
You
gave
know,
it credence. He
right?
did. He didn't shoot it down.
Right. And so what happens? It takes on a life of its own. And then
Yeah.
what happens on Wednesday and Thursday? Chase Claypool dodges the media in the locker room. He hasn't been available to talk to us at all since Sunday afternoon. And so now you're going, okay, so what's going on here? You know, like just hit these things head on. Like you said earlier, you know, and Tyke Tolbert did this just outside these walls here a little bit ago. He just real talked it, acknowledged that effort and that performance was not up to par, that there's been conversations had with the head coach and the receiver, with the receivers coach and the receiver, that Chase has gotten the message on like, look, like this is what we need out of you. And we understand you want the ball a bunch, and we understand that you think you can help this team more than you're being given the opportunity to help it. But you got to channel your energy in the right direction for the entire group and organization, and that wasn't done in week one. And so, man, there is a lot to this storyline, and I'm not so sure that they've done a terrific job at managing it, which to you and I probably doesn't come as a great surprise.
Not a huge surprise at all. This reveals to me as much inexperience in terms of leading a team as we saw in the entire first season under Matt Eberflus. This was something that he created, and now there's going to be much ado about nothing, and he opens himself up to more criticism that way. This is the way I would have handled it, and I know it's easy for us to say, but as I said, I'm not dismissing or diminishing the fact that Chase Claypool needs to have more effort and play and block more willingly, but he's far from your biggest problem, and that's what I would have said in real talk. And I would have said, if I were Matt Eberflus, look, we've got a left tackle that had 4 penalties. We've got a defensive tackle, a 3 technique, who didn't show up on the stat sheet. We've got a wide receiver that we neglected, who's a number 1 guy and got 2 targets. We've got a quarterback that turned the ball over twice in the final 20 minutes of a game. We have more issues than whether or not our number 3 wide receiver can block a screenplay. And I really think that when he, said what he said or didn't say what he didn't say, he let everybody like point the fingers and look at that and fixate on that. The Bears have a lot more problems than Chase Claypool, let me tell you.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but it's also a problem until it's not, and so they've got to make sure that this doesn't become something that unravels on them.
You want a guy that I want challenged in the offensive huddle? Braxton Jones. 4 penalties is unacceptable for a starting left tackle. I don't care all the things that it was a group effort and the false start, and he had 4 penalties. He's a starter. That's ridiculous.
Got to get better, 100%. And he owned his stuff in the locker room on Wednesday. Talked about his need to improve. The whole group needs to get better, and that's why it wasn't just a loss Sunday to the Packers. It was a loss that exposed almost everything, right? And that's why it's been so jarring in the city this week, because it exposed almost everything, and you go into Tampa without any real confidence in what is that sort of stability for you, and that's part of the problem. Chase Claypool's got to be part of the solution now, though, right? Mm-hmm. And Tyke Tolbert said that he has learned over the last whatever it's been now 10 months on there's different buttons to push. He said, I don't believe in coaching all my guys the same. The guys deserve different treatment based on what motivates them and what kind of unnerves them, and so they're working to manage that, and we'll see how successful they were based on what we see again on Sunday afternoon under the lights at Raymond James Stadium.
All right, let's get into our numbers game. All right, Dan, every week in the Chicago Tribune, you have a package that includes a lot of numbers, a lot of research, a lot of good stuff. Where do you want to start?
I'll rip them off really quickly. I'm going to start here with 7. That's the number of losses in the Matt Eberflus era by 16 points or more. That's 18 game span.
Is that depressing?
In an 18-game span, they've lost 7 games by at least 16 points or more. The only other teams in the NFL with more than 3 such losses are the Colts with 5 and the Rams with 4. So that tells you a little something about where they've been.
That's non-competitive. Those are non-competitive losses. Those aren't coming close. Those are, I know that 6 of those 7 were in the name of tanking, and people can rationalize all they want, but those are non-competitive losses.
All right, I'll stay on that same vein right now and give you 369. That's the number of points allowed by the Chicago Bears since they last won a game. They've also allowed 4,409 yards in that span. That's an average of 33.5 points and 400.8 yards per game in their 11-game losing streak. Got to get that thing eliminated as soon as possible.
33.5 points in their 11-game losing streak they're averaging. You are not going to win a single game giving up 33.5 points a game.
You're not. So we'll switch over to a Sunday afternoon number at 66. It's the receiving yards recorded by Mike Evans in the season opener for the Buccaneers, including a 28-yard touchdown pass from Baker Field in that upset win on the road in Minnesota. Mike Evans, David, has 9 consecutive seasons with 1,000 yards. That's second all time. The NFL record is 11 consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons by a guy you might have heard of. His name is Jerry Rice, who did it from 1986 through 1996 with the 49ers.
Mike Evans made Johnny Manziel Johnny Football, and Mike Evans is making Baker Mayfield into a legit NFL quarterback again. Mike Evans can play and is one of the more underrated receivers over the last 5 years.
Big dude, and also a guy Eddie Jackson said today, likes to talk a lot and get in your head. Last number for me is 6. It's the number of receptions, a team high by Roschon Johnson in the season opener. Roschon Johnson did just about everything that was asked of him in his NFL debut in week 1, and now obviously in a backfield by committee with Khalil Herbert and Deontay Foreman. He's going to get more opportunity to play Sunday against the Buccaneers. As you know, the Buccaneers are a blitz-heavy team, which requires you to have backs that can pass block. Roschon Johnson can do that. So you've got a guy who can run it with authority. You got a guy who can catch it. You got a guy who can block and be reliable in blitz pickup. So those 6 receptions were certainly noteworthy in week 1.
Todd Bowles' Buccaneers blitz Kirk Cousins 43% of the time, the highest rate in the NFL in week 1. They're going to come after Justin Fields, I think, unless they sit back and make him play quarterback and try to play the shell. But Todd Bowles' defense tend to be very aggressive. They don't care who the quarterback is. And here's what's interesting to me, Dan, that Roschon Johnson stat is interesting because how often, or I guess I should rephrase it, how rare is it where your rookie running back is your most trusted running back on third down because in part of pass protection? Usually that's when the guys get confused. They throw a lot at you. Yet he's a reliable pass catcher and he's a dependable pass blocker, which isn't always the case when you're talking about young running backs.
Justin Fields said he's handled himself like a grown man since the day he got here in the spring. And that's high praise from a captain on the team who's obviously had his head turned by what the rookie has been able to bring to the table.
I have one number, if you're done with the numbers, Chris.
Yeah, fire.
I have one number that I think includes a bit of a mea culpa by me. It's number 3. And that is the number of debuts that Baker Mayfield has won with his respective teams. He's on his 4th team, which doesn't necessarily surprise me. He started with the Browns, won that debut. Then I think he went to the Panthers. I think he lost that one, his first game. Then he went to the Rams. And you remember he won the first one with the Rams because it was all like, wow, Baker's here. That's cool. And now he's with the Bucs replacing Tom Brady. And he won in Minnesota. Who knew? So I think of Baker Mayfield. I think of the punk who tried to plant the flag in AstroTurf back at Oklahoma. I've never liked the guy. I hated his commercials, but I have to give him respect. He is a guy that gets the job done. I love the way that he mocked the idea of him stealing signs and signals from the Vikings. I'd be very careful if I were Alan Williams because Baker Mayfield is watching grudgingly. This is grudgingly. I'm giving Baker Mayfield the respect he has earned. This is his 4th team, but this guy is an NFL survivor, and I think he's going to be around for a while.
Listen, I love Baker Mayfield, and I've always loved Baker Mayfield because I'm in this for the theater, and you're going to get entertainment from that dude one way or another every single time he steps on the field. He's going to talk too much. He's going to be too demonstrative. It is the type of stuff that guys like you and me should live for. So I'm surprised to hear you say that you're.
He's a little cocky. That's all.
Not a little.
Yeah,
I mean, it's over the top. It's over the top.
A little over the top. You like the juice that he brings. You like all the juice. All right, let's bring in Adam Stadzinski. Speaking of juice, he's going to bring the juice to our prediction segment because we're going to predict Bears and Bucs on Sunday. I think we're all going to be shocked by Adam's prediction. Let's start with Studs.
Okay, my prediction comes with a little caveat here.
You got kidnapped, David.
All right, is it my internet? Are we good now? Can you guys hear me?
We're good, I think.
Cool. So, all right, I am picking the Bears, but here's the thing. I'm picking them almost off of blind faith that this bleep has to get that they understand it's got to get better, and that whatever the hell happened last week was inexcusable, and I hope it. And if it doesn't get better, if it doesn't look a hell of a lot better, you're going to this is going to get bad from my point of view. If I'm tearing you apart, that means it's bad. So get it together. Seriously, even picking them to win 25-20, I don't know how they get there, but I just based on them cleaning stuff up. Clean it the F up. Seriously, what the hell was that? So
Adam,
I'm still angry about it. I know it's been 4 days.
Will you be shaking on the couch like you described you shaking on the couch before kickoff last Sunday?
Right. So, and one last thing here real quick. Even if I can take a loss, on as it looks a hell of a lot better. If Mike has a crazy catch in the fourth quarter to win the game and it was a close game and everything looked a lot better, whatever, fine. But if they did it to the Packers again, it's going to be scorched earth from my point of view. So, all right, I got the Bears winning 25-20.
All right, 25-20 from Studs. Dan, what do you think?
Well, that was our first experiment taking callers on the Take the North podcast. Thanks for Studs for calling. I'm going Bears 20. I'm sorry, I'm going Buccaneers 20, Bears 16. I know I told you on Wednesday morning on the Mully and Haugh show, David.
You totally misled me, man.
I told you I was
totally misled me. I took your cue and I ran with it. Go ahead.
Let me walk you through this. I was leaning toward the Bears. My rationale was they cannot possibly be as bad as they performed in week 1. I cannot fathom that with my brain. This league is filled every year and really every week with bounce back performances that make you go, oh, okay. This is just what happens. Teams bounce back and forth. I thought the Bears were headed that way. And then I kept studying the matchups and kept trying to find the answers that Studs just mentioned that you're looking for to try to figure out how they get on the right side of this thing. I don't know how they're going to protect Justin Fields well enough against a blitz heavy performance from Todd Bowles and his defense. The Bucs have the scheme and the personnel on defense to make life very uncomfortable for Justin. Kirk Cousins just had 3 turnovers against them. I'm worried about that. I'm worried about the inability to rush the passer on a consistent basis in a way that helps your secondary try to account for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, who can be a problem on every single series that you're playing if you don't have rush to speed up the quarterback. So all that brings me back to a point where I think the Bears are going to be more competitive. It's going to look better than it did in week 1, but the Buccaneers win 20-16.
See, you had me thinking Bears after your hit on Wednesday morning.
I had myself thinking that.
I talked myself into it because I just feel like the Bears essentially, in my mind, they dropped boredom and complacency from the roster. They cut those two, and they're adding urgency and desperation. And that, to me, is the most compelling reason. Not very convincing, but compelling. They can't lose this game because they're staring at 0-3. And if you're staring at 0-3 in the NFL, as we all know, you're 3 games away from prosperity or disaster. And so if the Bears start 0-3, they're going down a path that is even uglier than it looks now. They haven't won a game since October 24th. They would be approaching the 1-year anniversary if they start 0-3. They may go a full year between victories if they start 0-3. You're not winning an Arrowhead. You better win Sunday at Raymond James Stadium. Tough place to play, but Justin Fields is going to, I think, be the bold stroke artist, the abstract artist. Stop with the paint by numbers, Luke Getsy. Stop with the checkdowns, Justin Fields. Take the risks. The rewards are worth it. That's going to be the difference. Justin Fields is going to either break 1 or 2 or take a shot down the field and find DJ Moore. Remember him, and 1 + 2 will equal 6. And they will win this game 28-27.
He can't turn the ball over. The quarterback can't turn the ball over. And I think that's going to be a problem on Sunday. By the way, the Bears have lost on their last 3 trips into Tampa by an average score of 34-7.
La 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 la.
There you go, Dan. They're due.
La 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 la. All right, let's wrap things up.
Stud said they're due, and that is literally on the marquee when you walk into the building here at Halas Hall. It just says Chicago Bears, they're due.
We're due. All right, let's wrap things up with a 2-minute drill.
The 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill.
Dan, Luke Getsy always represents himself very well. Took a lot of heat this week. Some of it warranted, some of it over the top. I think Justin Fields and Luke Getsy share responsibility for the passing game being too conservative, in the words of the quarterback. What did you make of Luke Getsy's explanation, and what do you expect Sunday?
Yeah, I thought that Luke was surprisingly positive about everything in that game. I think it was calculated when he met with us with the media to try to get a positive spin on this thing and keep the avalanche of negativity from bringing them down. He knows he's got to get better in certain areas, but I think there are also areas where they have to coach up the quarterback to understand why certain plays were called and where the ball needs to go, even if it needs to feel quote unquote forced at times. If you've got a one-on-one matchup with one of your guys and it's going to be a 50-50 ball, trust him, give him a shot, let DJ Moore make a play. He's supposed to be a stud for you, and so there's a little bit of a balancing act here of making things easier for the quarterback, but then the quarterback making things easier for himself. And so it'll be interesting to see what performance 2 looks like.
And I think part of that involves using his legs to set up his arm. Don't squelch or try to stifle something that is a special talent. I think Todd Bowles can't help himself. This Tampa defense is going to come after Justin Fields, and I think there's going to be some isolated one-on-one situations, whether it's on the perimeter or maybe even down the field. There are going to be some big plays for the Bears. I think they need to take advantage of that, and Justin Fields as a scrambler will reemerge as a difference maker. That's my opinion. I think we might see more of that, though.
Well, you make me segue into something that I wanted to talk about and something that I wrote about for storylines, Chicago Bears storylines for ChicagoTribune.com. And it's the ability for Justin to be a weapon as a scrambler, both as a runner and as a passer. Inside the building, there's been an increased emphasis on teaching him, hey, it's okay to escape pressure, get out of the pocket, work off script, and take a couple minutes to scramble laterally before you take off, vertically down the field and look for guys downfield. This is going to be fascinating to watch on Sunday because there's going to be opportunities for Justin to scramble. And I think the Bears want to see more than the tuck and runs. And they want to see some scramble, get out laterally and make a pass 15 yards down the field to Darnell Mooney or DJ Moore. Trying to coach that balance with the guy who's proven himself so dangerous with his legs is difficult. That's something that they've talked about inside the building, something Andrew Dinoco talked about this evening. It's something Justin talked about on Wednesday, something to keep an eye on Sunday.
Bears used to play in Tampa often late in the season. It was a nice respite for fans and for players as well. Conditioning could be a factor. It is mid-September. It will be humid and likely hot. Do you expect conditioning to be an issue, or stamina, or endurance?
Well, something they talked about when the schedule came out was putting together a hydration plan for the entire week here. You're going to have daytime temperatures on Sunday approaching or surpassing 90 in Tampa. And there's also, David, the possibility of afternoon thunderstorms, which if you remember the last time the Bears played in a monsoon, it went pretty well for them. So keep an eye on the weather forecast.
Everybody slide.
Keep an eye on the weather forecast on Sunday, and we'll see where that goes. Certainly they've got to account for the Florida Heat.
So the committee of running backs is interesting. Not quite sure who plays what role yet. I think Roschon Johnson seems to emerge as a guy that deserves more snaps. Khalil Herbert started and is unspectacular against the Packers. D'Onta Foreman still will play a role on this offense in this team. I believe they got him over from Carolina. Highly productive running back throughout his career. There's a story coming up in the Chicago Tribune. What can you say about that?
Yeah, look, I had a really nice visit with D'Onta Foreman in August. This is a guy who has had to develop survival skills in the NFL. This is his 7th season. It's his 6th team. He's had 2 season-ending injuries. He's been cut and out of football, left on his couch until a team needs an emergency running back like the Titans did in 2021. And he came in and he spelled Derrick Henry and got himself a contract with the Carolina Panthers. And then they traded Christian McCaffrey and he got himself a contract with the Chicago Bears. And he has understood how to attack opportunity, dealt with the devastating loss of his father in a one vehicle accident a couple years ago, right after he had been cut by the Atlanta Falcons and was trying to figure out his place in the league, to feel his motivation, to feel his purpose, to feel his survival skills. Pretty special dude. And I think the Bears feel very strongly about kind of the fortitude he has and the way he can help them going forward.
Wow, I look forward to that. Is that going to be online this weekend and in print on Sunday?
It will be in the storylines package on Friday morning at ChicagoTribune.com, and then somewhere in the weekend it will appear in your hard copy newspaper.
Awesome. Great job in finding that story and all the things you do during the week. What else, if we've left anything else out of this pretty comprehensive little podcast here?
No, I think we got to it all, and we managed our clock really well, and I think we did a really good job in an eventful week here, and now I think we just turn our attention ahead to Sunday, and I hope that when we jump back on the StreamYard on Sunday night, that it's with a much lighter tone than we've had to carry for the last 5 or 6 days.
And we will be back Sunday night with our immediate reaction to the Bears and Buccaneers Sunday at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. So join us then. Keep an eye out on the Twitter at Take the North Pod. at Dan Wiederer and at David Haugh. You have our Twitter feeds, and you can follow us there. You can follow us on your Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Watch us on 670 Scores YouTube page and just keep track. We're in season mode now. The Bears played game 2 on Sunday, and there's a lot going on, and look forward to talking to you next time. For Adam Sadzinski and Dan Wiederer, I'm David Haugh. Thanks for listening to Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.